Within this lecture today, we're going to discuss Chapter 56, Conservation, Biology, and Global Change. As we get to this slide, we're going to start about the first point that I want to discuss within this chapter as following in the book is human activities threaten Earth's biodiversity. Human activities can alter natural disturbances, trophic structures, energy flow, and chemical cycling, and just a bunch of ecosystem processes and dynamics that are very crucial to life and to other species within environments and ecosystems. Now, conservation biology is, the effort to sustain an ecosystem's process and stem the extinction and keep the extinction of species from happening, and also connecting on life sciences within social sciences, economics, and humanities. Now, this biology type is going to help us conserve a lot of things within environments to prevent human activities becoming threats or the threats alternating ecosystems on a huge scale. As we move to our next point, when we're talking about conservation of, ecosystems and biodiversity and stuff, we need to bring up the three levels of biodiversity. And, biodiversity is split between three main levels, which are genetic diversity, species diversity, and ecosystem diversity. As you can see in the pictures, there's, the three as it goes down in levels, being genetic being the first, and then community and ecosystem being the last. So genetic diversity is just genetic variation within a population, and also the differences between populations that can often associate with adaptations to local conditions and geographical environment factors. So moving on to the next level below that is the species diversity, which is the number of species in an ecosystem or across a biosphere, which is just the amount of species, which can be voles to other animals like rabbits, wolves, foxes, and things like that. Just many animals, many different species within an environment, the diversity of that. Moving on to the last level, which is the ecosystem diversity, which is the variety of ecosystems on Earth, which, there's rainforests, deserts, Arctic deserts, Arctic areas, and just, savanna plains and grasslands and stuff like that. That shows different diversities and different variations of ecosystems. So that's a big important level there. Moving on. Now, speaking on the topic of biodiversity and human welfare within this chapter, there are benefits from species and genetic diversity, which is, diversity helps species have better survival and things like that, leading to a lot of stuff of um, them being a better adaptations for their future generations and things like that, which lead to some species being threatened because they potentially provide medicines, foods, and fibers for human use due to their diversity, which makes biodiversity a crucial natural resource, kind of in a way, which also important to the version of conservation, which is helping these genetic diversities and species diversities stay alive, stay well, so no species become threatened or endangered. Moving on to ecosystem services, which are services that indirectly help human life and stuff like that, like air purity, water purity, and other things, and decomposing stuff. So these are just all services that are provided by ecosystems to benefit us. Now going on to the threats to biodiversity and four major types. Now we're going to talk about habitat loss first, which is, when a disturbance happens, which can be natural, like natural disasters, or human-made, like deforestation and stuff like that, polluting an area, which leads to an environment weakened, reducing population sizes and an ecosystem being damaged. This leads to a lot of stuff of populations having to be inbreeding and a lot of genetic variation being lost there, which is a threat to biodiversity. Moving to the second one is introduced species, is when a non-native species or invasive species gets introduced to an environment which harms it by overgrowth and no predators to that species, limiting population sizes, creating, once again, genetic variation to go at a downward spiral. Now going to overharvesting, which is usually done by humans by overharvesting a certain individual species or something, limiting them, becoming threatened, endangered, or so on, leading them to having to be protected, which leads to them having a low population, reducing the biodiversity within that, which that is why overharvesting is a big deal. And then going on to global change, which is like pattern changes and stuff like that, weather changes, climate change, that are harmful effects, which lead to population sizes are decreased due to certain environments being affected, and that leads to biodiversity being weakened because of genetic variation once again. And to the next point, we're talking about population conservation, focusing on population sizes, genetic diversity, and critical habitat. Now, this brings up extinction risk due to small populations. So, of course, smaller populations are always going to be higher risk of extinction because of due to this not much as diversity there, or they've been threatened because of overharvesting, habitat loss, and stuff like that, which leads to usually an extinction vortex happening, which leading to their extinction in the end, or just a crucial, like a very small population of them, which is the loss of genetic variation. Genetic variation is very important to the evolutionary response and adaptations of biology, such as in this point, it's supposed to help us, adapt for better survival and things, which when you're in a small population level, it happens due to not much genetic variation being there, which leads to inbreeding and stuff like that, which is going to cause the drift of genetic loss of variation, leading to bad things to happen, new strains of pathogens and things like that to happen, to lower reproduction or have a higher mortality rate, leading to them be extinct or just a very rare, very small number of species. Now we're going to talk about extinction risk in small populations. Within this, we're going to talk about two factors, which is the minimum viable population size, which is the minimum a population can be at so the species can sustain itself in numbers and not face against genetic diversity loss and biodiversity loss, leading to them to genetic vortexes and things. So this is important for that. And the effective population size is the size of what population could be to be successfully at reproduction, which is usually numbering between male and females and stuff like that to equal the size. So you can see in this equation, numbers of males, numbers of females divided, which is going to divide numbers of males times 4 number of females to equal the effective population size, which in the population we can see. Now talking about critical habitat and population decline. This is where we're going to talk about when habitats are in a critical state, which species can be threatened or endangered, showing a downward trend in decline of their species, which even can include species at a minimum or far above minimal viable population species. Now the importance is realizing what is critical to a habitat and the environment factors that we need to keep so populations don't decline. So this is why we compare critical habitat factors to population decline. So what's going to keep the population alive, so when we're discussing here, and what's critical to the habitat to sustain and keep the balance of the ecosystem. Within conservation, we are going to debate in this point is weighing conflicts of demand. That's determining what is the population's number and habitat needs is only part of strategy to save the species. So what is their demands and what is their conflict? So like we need to know what's going to save the species, what's going to keep them alive. So this is when scientists weigh the species against the conflicting demands, which is when we include a lot of stuff between science and technology and society to help how we're going to conserve the species and things like that, weighing their demands and what is conflicting them to help make this species survive and save it. We're going to move on to landscape and regional conservation, which helps us sustain biodiversity. This is helping us understand what a landscape is, which is a structure that's critically important to conservation due to many species interacting with it on an ecosystem and living on the borders of it and everything, which is just this is the main part of an ecosystem, which leads us to the fragmentations and edges, which is the boundaries and edges of an ecosystem, which have their own set of conditions, which can differ from the main landscape of an ecosystem or stuff like that, which can be such as the edge could be a river compared to a forest and stuff like that, which has their own conditions for species to survive on or adapt to. Continuing here with the same previous point, we're talking about corridors that connect habitats. Now, movement corridors are like narrow strips or clumps of land that are habitats that connect both of isolated patches of ecosystems, which can be very important for conserving biodiversity, which usually are seen as like bridges, tunnels, and stuff like that. The animals are like can go over and be avoid of being killed, like going across highways. So like in the picture, you can see a bridge, natural bridge going over into the other ecosystem, so the animals do not have to cross the road. It just helps them survive between that strip between the two ecosystems there. Moving on to another critical part of conservation, which is establishing protected areas. Within this, is preserving biodiversity hotspots, which are, highest priority of this because hotspots are, small areas which a number of endemic species or large numbers of endangered or threatened species live in. Now, endemic species are species that are not found anywhere else other than areas. So these hotspots are kept this way and preserved, so like nothing can affect that species. Which moves to the next one, which is natural reserves, which are protected areas are set aside to be unchanged forever, no human activities within it, and are ecosystems that are balanced and self-regulate itself without any effects from pollution and stuff within itself or disasters usually. Now, these zone reserves are like an extension of a region, which are areas that keep from disturbing, natural nature from humans in urban areas. So it could be like a field in between a road and a forest. So it's a kind of buffer zone that no one can go in to help buffer between these areas, so nothing really gets harmed within that area. Urban ecology is a brief topic discussed in this, which is just a field of examining organisms within their environment of urban settings, which is just high city areas and stuff like that. We're just going to study organisms, how they act with humans and their life and population within that size is a study of just urban settings. Next point is Earth is changing rapidly as a result of human actions, which is a critical thing when it comes to conservation. Nutrient enrichment is one thing that can be happen due to human activity, which often is due to when humans do pollute or like use runoff that enriches us nutrient to overly exceed the critical load amount with in the ecosystem, so it starts to limit it and stuff like that, and it causes an effect on regular cycling in the ecosystems, which moves on to another thing humans do, which is toxins environments, which is from industry runoff, compounds, pesticides, pharmaceuticals, and plastic waste, which can affect environments pretty rough, which lead to pollution or just damages and disruptions. So that's why Earth is changing rapidly due to human actions because of our rapid growth and a rapid effect on the planet's nature. Now we're going to talk about greenhouse gases and climate change. Now there's a rising atmospheric carbon dioxide levels in present day due to human activity, which is leading to the greenhouse effect, and which is greenhouse gases in the atmosphere transmitted to visible light, which they intercept and absorb much of the infrared radiation that the Earth emanates, rating it mostly of it backward to Earth, which you can see slightly down here in the bottom right corner, which shows kind of a little diagram of this process of it going to the surface, bouncing and coming back down in the atmosphere, which is warming the Earth's surface and providing energy on the Earth's surface for other things. So why it's called a greenhouse effect is kind of compared to like a greenhouse, which greenhouse radiates more radiation down into plants and keeps it within its ecosystem in that little building to provide better photosynthesis growth and more promotion of sunlight to the plant, and that kind of creates us better levels of that, which this is doing here on Earth's surface constantly when the sun is being radiated down to it. Now, there's biological effects of this, which cause temperature changes and stuff like that, and leads to model changes of climate, which different patterns and things like that. Now, there are solutions, which is just limiting some pollutions that cause these climate changes and things like us, because human activities leading to climate change mostly, and that's like causing our atmosphere ozone to be damaged, and we need this greenhouse effect, but if it gets worse, we don't want that straight radiation on us. We need the bounce off in our ozone to level it out for it not to be harmful for us. Now, moving to the last point of this chapter, we're going to talk about sustainable development can improve human lives while conserving biodiversity. This type of development is meant for like keeping a population of a species on track without affecting their ability of their future generations to meet their needs. Which is meaning if we give a lot to a species now, is that going to harm their future, make their lifespan of their species shorter? No, because in this kind of development, we're going to give it what's just enough now to continue our rate which won't affect the ability of future generations to meet their needs at that point, which is limiting resources and stuff like that, and just having the minimal stuff that we need now to survive to continue operating at an optimal level, which is the same for the future of the biosphere. We have to do these developments to continue future generations, future times. But I want to end off this lecture and thank you for listening, and thank you.